Okay, welcome back to the Greg McAfee Show, where we discuss steps to successful entrepreneurship, how to take your business to new heights, and ultimately follow your dreams. As I mentioned in the last podcast, I sold McAfee Heating and Air and Plumbing, and I decided to ask my broker, Fred Silberstein, who did a great job selling this business for me, if he would like to be interviewed. And sure enough, he said yes. And it's a great interview. And I want to introduce Fred. He's got 27 years of experience in mergers and acquisitions. Fred Silberstein and his team completed over 432 transactions, totaling approximately $3.6 billion in revenue. 133 of those transactions have closed since 2021. Now, their clients have included top national industry names like Blue Dot Services, Service Experts, and American Residential Services, along with private equity-backed strategics such as Wrench Group, Apex Home Services, Any Hour Group, Turnpoint, and Strike Point. Now, since he founded SF&P Advisors in 2001, Fred has served as president and CEO, focusing on residential home services, commercial HVAC, plumbing, electrical, roofing, and related coaching and marketing companies. And they've transacted with 61 unique buyers and helped create 19 new platforms in the home service space. Prior to SF&P, Fred worked in audits and transactions as PricewaterhouseCoopers and Blue Dot Services. As a licensed CPA, Fred specializes in the GAAP accounting, business valuations, and advisory services related to mergers, acquisitions, and business sales. Let's see why Fred and his team are so darn successful. They worked out extremely well for me, did a great job. I recommend them highly, as you will see from this interview. Now let's get started. Hey, this is Greg McAfee, and welcome to the Greg McAfee Show. Now let's get started. So, hey, welcome back to the Greg McAfee Show. And like I told you either last week or the week before, that someone has acquired McAfee Heating, Air, and Plumbing Company. Today, I have who served as my broker during this entire acquisition. His name is Fred Silberstein, and Fred's going to talk about today just kind of what we went through. And he is with SF&P Advisors, and I'll let Fred tell you just a little bit about himself. But I have, as you know, I read the bio at the beginning. But Fred's been doing this a long time. I don't know, Fred, if you specialize in HVAC, plumbing, electrical, but we're going to talk about that today. So, folks, we're going to get started right now. I've titled this Top Dollar Exit, How the Pros Sell Their Companies. So, Fred, welcome to the Greg McAfee Show.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with you. Certainly on the other side of the transaction as well. You look more relaxed than you did 6 months ago as well. So hopefully you've taken some of the stress off.
Oh, a tremendous amount. 500 pound off my back, especially going through that due diligence. That wasn't easy. But we're going to talk more about that today. But that's just something that has to be done. If you're doing a professional acquisition, you've got to go through this. So Fred, first of all, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been involved in acquisitions for my kind of company?
I started in 1998 working for I call the late 90s. It was the first gold rush of people buying HVAC companies, and it lasted for a little bit, but then it came back with private equity in 2015. So I've been doing it from 98 through now, and it's 432 transactions,
Wow.
3.6 billion and closed transaction revenue over the last, what is that now, 27 years. I've got the grades to prove it as well.
Well, at least you got grace. But hey, when let's talk about, I got some questions for most of our listeners are home improvement, or I'm sorry, home service entrepreneurs. Some are managers, and stuff like that. So that's who I talk to the most. But there's a lot of different entrepreneurs listening to this show. So just a couple questions we have today, like maybe 11. But Fred, when should an owner really start preparing to sell their business?
So I think it, sort of depends on the why, right? Why do you own the business? And if the why is you're building something for one day to sell, then I think you ought to be starting pretty early. It doesn't mean you're engaging us, but there's steps that you should be thinking about. If ultimately your goal is to build something to sell, then you ought to be working on it, as early as possible, right? And there's some foundational steps that we'll get into, but if that's the goal, sometimes look, there's lifestyle businesses and people want to, just hold it. And so it depends on the why. But if the reason is, hey, I'm building something to one day sell, as soon as you've identified that, I think that's the appropriate time to begin working on and begin thinking about what an eventual exit looks like.
And I will say, from the contractor side, that would be a lot easier to do, is to get to a point where you can maintain that instead of having to go back and fix things and redo things. And it's a lot harder that way. It's just like losing weight. It's a lot easier to keep it off than take it off.
But couldn't agree with you more in that regard. And I do think those foundational steps that you take are really important, and it sets you up for success in the long run.
So, what are if you were to give 3 to 5 of the most important things a business owner should start doing to prepare rather for a successful sale? What would you say to us about that?
So the first one rings, near and dear to my heart, which is I'm a CPA. Numbers drive transactions, and I think, a lot of folks don't want to spend money. I'll call it on the scorekeeper, right? They're not additive. They're not increasing results. But I think it's one of the most important positions you can have in your organization. You had it, Greg, right? And you saw how valuable it was with Candace and getting that back office in line. And folks don't want to, it's hard. It's hard to say, like, I'm going to put a real person in the seat and put that person in the seat in the beginning and have them grow with me. But I do think it's critical, and having somebody who understands GAAP and getting really good financial information. It allows you not only to manage the business daily, right? Looking at the KPIs, allows you to react, but it also gives you really good information. And then ultimately, when you go to transact, and you say, hey, what's your EBITDA? Well, you're going to know, because you've got, and I'll define EBITDA for those who don't know. It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. We like to add an extra A there for add backs, right? So anything that's not going to incur in the future is part of that EBITDA definition. But, being able to identify and understand, that you're growing and EBITDA is going to continue to improve. It's an important aspect, but it's not just accounting. I think accounting is certainly important, but I think building your service contract base is also, really important. It's that reoccurring revenue. How much were you getting per month in reoccurring revenue without having to do much, right? And it creates opportunities, among your guys. It's, if you have a service contract and you've got to go into the house twice a year, well, to me, that's 2 times a year. You got an opportunity to sell something to them, right? And it helps put a nice fence around the customer, and they're always going to come to you when there's a problem. So I do think, developing your service base through service contracts is another thing that's really important. We can spend probably a lot of time talking about marketing, right? And where you are as a company and how you're developing and branding versus, where you are as the company's developed, those things change over time, right? And so, initially when you're in the growth phase, you should be spending more on marketing. But as the company matures and you become into that next cycle, and you're already well branded, and you shouldn't do it before you're well branded, but you should ease off of the branding strategy and look to do more, SEO, search engine optimization, right? Well, everyone's fighting over Google placement, and there's some different tricks there, but I do think, your marketing and that strategy and what that looks like. Another one that I think everyone needs to be thinking about is succession plan. What are you going to do with the business, right? And do you have the right team in place? That something happened to you, Greg, a year ago before you even contacted me, right? Was would the business would the business have prospered or something if you weren't available to be in the seat? And I think that's, people ought to be thinking about what that looks like and having a good succession plan in place as well. We like, look, I'm an M&A guy, and I like folks, like if you can exercise, that skill and go out and actually buy something and show. We did the Horizon transaction. This was back in 2017, and Horizon was a big powerhouse. At the time we did the transaction, about 140 million in top line revenue. They had just gone out about 6 months before and bought this little tiny $5 million tuck-in business in Connecticut. First time they ever had to get on a plane to go run a business or help run a business. And we got into their management meetings with the prospective buyers, and we spent an inordinate amount of time talking about this small little acquisition in Connecticut, what they did, that the run rate on is a $5 million acquisition. If you took first 3 months, they didn't do much. Second 3 months, they actually implemented change. They got them to focus on the replacement cycle, just simple change. They had a whiteboard outside the owner, who was now their partner's office. They said, if we can just focus on 2 replacements a day, we're going to have a different business. And that the first quarter they did that, the run rate was 2.5 million. So you annualize that $5 million business almost overnight became a $10 million business. And we sat in there with the PE, this is at the beginning stages of private equity, and everyone was like, we spent an inordinate amount of time because it was such a small dollar amount of the overall, Horizon pie, but everyone wanted to hear, was it scalable? Could they repeat this? And I think, depending on where you are and what your goals are, but to go out and be able to do a transaction and show that you could be successful, that certainly helps the process along as well.
Yeah, and that is that's great information. And a lot of contractors, they just don't think ahead. Really, we don't think ahead. We're day to day making things happen.
Yep.
Then one day, hey, I think I'll sell. And then nothing's ready. So that's the reason for this podcast is to help you prepare for this. Because I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's one of my favorite lines that I used with Fred's team. And by the way, Fred has an awesome team that just helped us tremendously. And we have CPAs and we have accounting managers and all those types of people. But Fred's team, they know what they're doing because they do this every single day. So, Fred, what would you say the most common mistakes that you see from contractors, like us,
Yep.
Trying to sell?
So I think it's pretty easy. There's a lot of what I call bird dogs out there who can figure out your email. Some of them are really, they can figure out your cell phone, and they try to contact you and try to get your interest. And you may have had a bad day or a bad week, and you may respond. And so it's pretty, and I think before I was even involved, Greg, you had talked to some prospective buyers on your own. And I'd like you to comment on what that was like doing it with us and without. But I think the number one mistake folks in your seat make is they try to do it alone. And I always say, how do you even know you're being treated fairly without running a competitive process, without having multiple folks at the same time looking at the same information? How do you know that it's college recruiting, right? You're now the 5-star running back. They want you for this season, and so they do everything they can. They're really nice in how they go about it, but they're also capitalists, and so they're going to try to get it for the best deal they possibly can for them. And the way we understand fair market value is we let the process play out and have several folks bidding at the same time, and that's how you know that you've been treated fairly along the way.
Yeah, and I will say from my standpoint is just because somebody makes you a high offer does not mean it's going to stick. They can give you a high offer at the get go and then beat you down if you don't have a team like Fred's to back you up, check things, and make sure you're at that value before you even go into it.
Yeah.
So that's extremely powerful, and that's what your team did for us because we actually had another deal on the table that fell through. Had we went through with that deal, they would have beat us down so much. I would have either said no or took a lot less.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those were my two options.
Yeah.
And it would have been extremely discouraging. So I'm actually glad it fell through and that we met Fred. So
Led you to us and led you to a really successful outcome.
and our price stuck all the way through the deal. It didn't change $1,
Yep.
which
Yep.
was which
We,
was
we were nervous when, there was a month or two where we were like, Fred, what's going to happen? I'm like, don't worry. We're going to get through it. It's, look, I always say it's one of the things that's really important for folks in your seat is you got to perform during diligence, right? You sign the LOI. These things, they never go up. They only go one way, right? Ideally, we stick at the terms that we negotiate in the LOI. But if you're being paid a growth multiple, guess what? They expect you to continue to grow, right? And if you in the middle of a process, have a month or two that's not growing and is going backwards, those are the tough deals. Those are the deals where there is certainly a potential to get retraded, which if the business isn't the same than where they thought it would, I can understand. So, we always say, don't think, in the middle of the process, even once you signed LOI, deal's not closed until the money hits your account, signature pages are exchanged. Very important to stay dialed in and stay on top of the business. And it's, going back to your point on diligence, Greg, it is like a full-time job when you're going through, phase 3, we call it due diligence, but you can't let that overcome the, the operations of the business. And it's very important to stay focused and continue to drive results.
yeah. I just thought about that when you said phase 3. In the Marine Corps, phase 3 was the easiest part in the boot camp.
I think I told you from the beginning. You probably remember this one. I call phase 3. It's I call we're old enough to understand this reference. A colonoscopy without the anesthesia, right? It's a literal pain. So, but we have resources to help you get through. We like to say it's trust but verify, right? They're writing you a big check. They're going to do their work around it. We've done this, hundreds of times, and we're going to help you get through it. But anyone who thinks that, oh, once I sign the LOI, it's easy, it's actually not. It's actually a lot harder at that point because of all the work it entails to get it over the goal line.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of I say I create most of my problems. Had I just relied on Fred's team and took a deep breath and moved on, I would have been a lot better off. But a lot of you are similar to me. We're hands-on. We're trying to make things happen. And if they don't move at our speed, we start freaking out. And I did for a little bit, but we got through it and made it happen. Fred, what's typically the average size company you work with?
So the average this year, using your deal is obviously part of the average. We've closed 20 transactions. Average revenue, we always measure revenue. When I gave you the 3.6 billion, that's based on closed transaction revenue. Average this year is 12. Over the last 5 years, I actually, calculated this coming into the call. It's been about 16 million. And I think part of the reason why it's gone down is, look, the specifically on the residential side, HVAC, plumbing, it's been there's been a lot of transactions that's happened, right? 10 years ago, PE didn't want any involvement, with the when I say PE, that's private equity. They want nothing to do with the trades, with HVAC, plumbing, electrical companies. Somewhere along the line, somewhere in the last 10 years, and I don't know if this is exactly true, but I feel like they want to own every one of these companies, and it's our mission to help make it happen. But there's been a ton of transactions, so there's just not as many, really big ones. Candidly, I like the what gets me excited, Greg, are the bigger ones. But part of it is, look, we have a team and we go up and downstream, and we like, at least like $500,000 in EBITDA, so there's something there, right? On 432 deals, probably a third of them were distressed, right? Late 90s, early 2000s was the first roll up that busted. So I got to buy them and then I got to sell them. I did similar work for Service Experts back when they were owned by Lennox. It helped, and it helped build the brand that exists today. But I don't want to go back to doing distressed deals, right? There's just not the same money. It's the same work. It may even be more work when something is broken. But ideally for us, we want at least kind of 5 million, $500,000 in EBITDA. But the bigger the better, and there's a direct correlation between the exit and the size of the deal based on how big your EBITDA is.
Yeah, and just so my viewers, listeners know, Fred doesn't make a dime until it sells. So
success fee only. Built this entire practice. We work on a success fee. Look, there are times, and it happens both ways. Sometimes I have a seller who's called me and they, have a change of heart. That's okay too. And sometimes I've had days that are a day before closing and the buyer, oh, one last thing, it's a formality. We just need board approval. Then the board kills the deal, right? And so these things happen. This was, again, where I say deal is not closed until the signature pages are exchanged, which is very anticlimactic, right? Probably the most anticlimactic day of the whole process was the closing day. But the funds hit, signatures exchanged, and that's a great day in the transaction. But we've built the entire practice. We only get paid if the deal closes. If the deal doesn't close, no harm, no foul. There's no deposits, there's no retainers, there's no reimbursement. We work strictly on a success fee.
So they've got skin in the game, and they're working just as hard to make sure the ducks are in a row and everything's in order prior to even going out.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So somewhere around 5 million is the number, and you've got, I mentioned this on my podcast. It was last week that if I would have had family coming into this, kids involved, we wouldn't be doing this route. We would have went a different route. But some of you, like me, do not have family coming into it, nor do you have any employees with the capabilities of purchasing your business for what you want out of it. So this is okay to do. It's okay. There's so many pros and cons on private equity and all that kind of stuff. But if you get in with a good group, they will work hard to maintain your culture and continue to grow what you've built. And I believe that. Time will tell.
They are not buying your business for it to go backwards, right? They are taking the bet that they're going to be able to help supplement, but have your business continue to move forward and be additive, right? Maybe they can have a better service titan pricing or better pricing for your OEMs, and some ways to help. Ultimately, it's up to the local operations, but they're buying businesses because they expect them to grow and they want to push a couple levers. It's always, I've heard this a lot through the years. They say if cash wasn't a constraint, when you own the business, every day you're dealing with cash constraints, right? And so if you weren't dealing with those cash constraints, could you grow the business faster? And so they're trying to eliminate some of those impediments that are in your way. Well, maybe you need more vehicles, right? More trucks on the road. It's gonna increase revenue. Well, all of a sudden you're looking, I got to put 4 trucks on the road. That's $200,000 that you got to write the checks for, right? And so they have ways to help that and help you, potentially go faster and achieve better results.
Absolutely. So what do you think separates the sellers who get top dollar, and I think I did, from the ones who settle or struggle?
So I think it goes back to the foundational work that you put in, right? Greg, it was obvious to me from the beginning that you were no longer working, in the business, that you started working on the business. And that's a really important distinction, right? And I think folks that set themselves up, have that succession planning, allow themselves to be out of the day-to-day, to look at a big picture. And that's certainly a big part of it. It's, some people, and we've seen this a lot. There's, I'm not going to say anything that something this may resonate with some, but there's lifestyle businesses. And when you have a lifestyle business and, look, these businesses are capable of generating enough cash flow for you to live a good life, but if you're really truly living a lifestyle business, you're not really preparing it for a sale, right? And so it's great, and you can run things through the business, but that's not really the end game. It's you got to maximize it for a potential sale, and there's just different levers that you should push. Your mix. Are you in the residential, retail and replacement business? And to me, it's always been that's what gets the highest multiple and the highest outcome, right? And it may be easy to be distracted by a new construction project, or blinded because, oh, you've got this and this, but not paying attention to your mix. Like, stay core to your values and what's going to drive the most value, right? Allowing one customer to control your destiny. What happens if that customer goes away? Like, may seem great, we're getting all this work from this one customer. Well, now all of a sudden you got a customer concentration issue when a buyer looks at it. So, you can never get too fat with one customer. Going back to the comments on the on the accountant and the controller, right? If you're not tracking and looking at your KPIs and adjusting for things in real time based on what you're seeing, business can get away from you pretty quick, right? All of a sudden you've got this large payroll, and you gotta pay your employees. And if you're not converting and not doing the things you're supposed to, and then you're not adjusting, and you continue to grow, you could develop a pretty big problem pretty quickly, right? So I think it's being reactionary, but also being proactive and getting out in front of it and understanding demand and what's happening. Look, easy to say, and Dave Geiger always said to me, he's like, Fred, I'm the biggest genius when the weather cooperates.
Yes.
And I'm the village idiot when it doesn't, right? We can all look really smart when it's 90 degrees in Dayton for 30 days, and it's easy to get the phone rings. But what happens when it's not? Because that's not the norm, right? And it's adjusting through those, through some of those valleys, and how you deal with your workforce and keeping them busy. And again, goes back to service contracts. Good way to keep the guys busy when the demand's not taking place is to have the work and have the opportunities to service your customer base.
That's right. And I'll say this again. When we first started talking, you had a list of questions that you asked me to prepare your brochure, to advertise for us, to market us, to brand us, basically.
Yeah.
And I kind of know my role as far as doing a good job on the phone, the initial interview.
Yeah.
And we knew that on that first interview that we had a good opportunity with this group because we just hit it off.
Yeah.
But what would you tell contractors that I didn't know what I didn't know? What's their role playing this during the sales process, and what should they be doing or not doing?
So I think it's, look, the materials, and we're going to stand behind the materials, right? And you saw that, and we're we come up with the EBITDA view, and then we support EBITDA, but it's more of what's happening in the background, right? It's culture. How are they going to learn about culture without talking to you? And that's a pretty good direct example. But I think it's just those, we call them fireside chats, but it's that initial phone call where it's similar to this when you're on a Zoom meeting and you're getting to know. We always like the buyers to go first. Here's our thesis. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what differentiates us from some of our peers. And then they're trying to learn about you, what you've built, how you do it. It's a high level overview. They have the materials, but I think hearing it directly from you matters. And I think it starts to build the relationship. Those Zoom calls, right? It starts to build the foundation for what a potential deal can look like. Those early steps in the transaction become really meaningful as the list thins, as the herd starts to thin out, and you get down to the finalists. I always say to folks, keep a little pad next to you, because you're going to have a lot of phone calls. You're going to have a lot of options. And right when you get off the call, it's good was that a 5-star? Was that a 4-star? Right? Just, was that somebody you would never do a business, never do a deal with? It's, because there's going to be some of those. You're going to kiss some frogs along the way before you find the perfect partner.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was in Florida, away for, I don't know, 7 to 9 days. And I think I interviewed 15 groups in 3 days.
Right.
But hey, that's the way it fell. That's it, the brochure hit, and we got calls lined up, and just like all our other work, we got to make hay when the sun shines. And that's
exactly when the opportunity's out there, that's the right time, for the to do those phone calls. And again, they're very high level, but it's a way for you to start to build a relationship, start building some camaraderie with the potential buyer, learn what they're all about too, right? Like you had options, Greg. Everyone's going to have options, and the money's going to be there, but you want to make sure that you're leaving the business, it's your legacy. I mean, in your case, it's got your name on the door, right? So it's even more. So you want to make sure that they don't do anything to screw the team, the team matters, your customers matters as well, and your reputation matters as well. Last time I looked, Dayton's still a relatively small place, and so you want to make sure you're picking somebody who has the same standards that you do as well.
Yeah, there were several things we looked for because it mattered to me. It mattered how my team was taken care of. Are they going to get rid of everybody and rehire, or are they going to change the name? Are they going to whatever? I mean, it was important to me. I've been doing this thing for 35 years and started with $274.
Yeah.
So this group that we sold to seemed to check all the boxes to the best of our knowledge. There's no guarantee down the road they won't change something, but I felt very comfortable and good about what we did. Fred, if you were to give us, wrapping it up here, a few more questions, what's the best kept secret you've seen that's helped sellers get the highest multiple possible?
I think it's the team that's staying behind, right? And so if and your business and in most businesses, there's a people dependency. And if you ask me, what's the one thing that PE sort of doesn't take enough into account? I think it's that local management. And so I think having, Carrie in your case, who was very seasoned and did a very good job and had a great handle on the business, right? But people are like, I don't, and they're not giving that much thought, but it's so critical to think about that and think about the team, because that's really what you're selling. Yes, you're selling the customers and you're selling the phone numbers and all the other intangibles and the 30 years you've been in business, but that team matters so much, and it's such a critical part. And I remember our first conversation we had. I think Carrie and Candace were part of it, right? They were pretty critical to the transaction. The amount of times where you have sellers and they're just like, I get it, and like, we've done this a lot of time. It's not hard for us, but when they're in your position, they're like, I can't have anybody know that I'm even thinking about this. And I think that's a mistake, right? Like, yes, the whole team doesn't need to know, but you're critical people and you're going to start asking for information. They're going to find out anyways. So we call it the cone of secrecy, bringing them under the cone of secrecy, having them part of the meetings, is pretty critical. And I think folks, sometimes, they don't realize how important it is, because that's who they're buying, is that go for it team.
Yeah. They weren't buying me. They bought me for what I did, not what I'm going to do. They bought McAfee for what we're going to continue to do.
Exactly.
So it definitely paid off, but I definitely kept everybody else and outside of my family on the low. Nobody knew anything about this except a few people, and only the people who needed to know. Up until
it doesn't need to be many people under the cone of secrecy. It needs to be a few, though, and that certainly helps the process along.
We closed on a Friday morning. I think it took 8 minutes. And
very anticlimactic, right? It was I always have to tell folks is a couple words, congrats, but it's what's this big call with 30 people on it, and just to release signatures and say we're gonna release funds now.
Yeah, 12 attorneys on their side, 12 attorneys on my side, and Fred,
and
me. But anyway, and we filmed it. By the way, we videoed that on my big screen. I had my big screen pulled up. But anyway, we felt we did a great job because we've run such a tight ship for years. And, a lot of contractors, that's why I'm pushing so hard, get your ducks in a row a couple years before you even consider doing this, because it matters. And the more efficient you are, the more you'll get out of your business.
Yeah.
And so here's a good question for you, Fred. What should sellers look for in a broker? Because like you said, there's a lot of
there's a ton, and for me, what I think is the most important is experience. 432 transactions. Greg, I learned something on every deal, including yours, and I can even tell you what I've learned on your deal specifically, right? That calendar matters, and when that calendar that the buyer puts out, they ought to stick to it, right? So that was a good lesson to be reminded of in your transaction. But there's a lot of people. There's been a lot of money that's come into the trades, and there's a lot of people. 10 years ago, it was easier for me. There wasn't the same competition, right? I've been doing this, 27 years, and for a while nobody. But look, with all the interest, the space has caught fire and it's gotten more competitive. But I think you really got to look at experience. I mean, we've done deals with 59 unique buyers in the trade, specifically in HVAC, plumbing, right? We know all of the buyers, and that matters. We have relationships. It's interesting. We had a deal. I won't mention who it is. A couple of years ago, first deal we were doing with this particular buyer, they came in something like $9,000 within the Q of E. We're like, oh, that's great. That's a big win for us, right? We're that's fine. They're like, well, we're paying you 9x. We want our $81,000. And I said, guys, this is the first deal you're doing with SF&P. I'll go back to the client. I'll tell them what's happening, but just want to make sure this is the message that you want to deliver. A day later, they call me back. They're like, nope, we're gonna hold price solid, and so I think that matters, right? Like these, look, these guys need to continue to do M&A, and I think our track record and having us in your corner, they don't want to be the guys who say, hey, we're coming back with a retrade. We're gonna need to do another deal with SF&P down the road, and so let's treat everybody fairly, and I think that helps a lot.
I totally agree. So just this question, and you mentioned it at the beginning, but if someone's not thinking about selling for 2 to 5 years, what's the best thing they can do today, even though it feels premature?
Start thinking about it. Let's start there, right? Start to put the wheels in motion. Think about what it looks like, right? Again, first step. How's the accounting department? If like you're not getting results in a timely fashion, and the results you are getting, you're not even sure if they're accurate, there's a change that needs to take place there, right? And so again, I think building the foundation with your customer base through service contracts, you start thinking about where you're going, right? And look at it a big picture. Like, yes, it's EBITDA. Well, your EBITDA has to grow, and how are you going to grow EBITDA? And it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's you got to step into it. You don't go to 500,000 then the 2 million. You gradually go up and you start doing more and more sales, and you got to be pretty conscious of what you're thinking and what your end game is as well along the way.
Yeah, and for us, we've always had again, tight ship, different than most. But we've always had our financial statements between the 10th and the 15th. So when you're running a company and you don't even have them each month, it's going to be extremely tough for you to sell your business, because these guys need numbers, they need them fast, and they need to be accurate. And we blew them away when we were 5 days early.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
Yeah.
So
it's important. It's like that, how you respond to their requests. It's a big part of the organization that you've built as well.
So, Fred, I just want to say thanks for taking the time. I know it's short notice for you to come on the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to add or advise anyone of that
I would just say it's it sounds easy. It's not, right? You've been through it, right? You can talk about the stress, but I think it's just important to have the right team in your corner with the right advisor. It's a very, how many times are you going to do this in your life, Greg? Once? So I think, when you think about the gravity of that decision, right? Surround yourself with the right advisors. We're talking a lot of money. Don't be there's penny wise and pound foolish, right? It's like, if we don't succeed, you don't owe us a dollar. It's a success fee. But I think it's important to have the right guys in your corner who are fighting for you and making sure you get the best deal possible. And just realize it's not an easy process, but there is a finish line. I know, there were times we're like, Fred, are we going to get there? And we did, right? And ultimately, it might have been delayed a little bit, another, a week at the end, but ultimately we got there, and that's our intended goal, is to get the transaction across the finish line.
Yeah, and friends of mine who sold their business, they said it's going to be tough, and due diligence is tough because they dive deep, and if you're paying that much for a company, you would dive deep too. However, we don't know what we don't know, but you get through it. It's a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but you get through it. It's if you want the deal.
Yeah, 432 others have gotten through it, right? You'll find your way through it, but it does go, it does meander up and down. There's good days in the cycle, and then there's bad days, but ultimately what matters is that closing day.
Yeah, and just know you'll get through it. That's just it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So again, Fred, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. Good advice. A lot of good information that most people don't know. I know. Like I said, I didn't know. I've been doing this 35 years. I had no idea how to sell.
Yeah.
So thanks for all your help. Thanks for what you did for us. And have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Take care.
See you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
So before we wrap up, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please hit that like button. I appreciate knowing you like this thing. We've got thousands of viewers and listeners. You can't listen to this whole thing and not like it. So please hit that like button. It's very simple. You just click on that little like button right there. And if you want to leave a comment, that's awesome. Definitely helps our algorithms. You can also support this podcast by rating and reviewing on iTunes or your preferred listening platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. There's lots of stuff going on at The Greg McAfee Show. No spaces, no underscores. Look me up personally on my personal Facebook page and follow me. You will get the words of the day. You will get a Bible verse every day, and you will get a motivational quote every day, and they all tie in together with the word of the day. Be sure to tune in next week. I've got some good stuff happening next week. Thanks for listening, and as always, carry on. God bless. Make this day the best day of your life, because we're not promised tomorrow. I'll see you later.